Good evening, folks. I see several new faces today and hope you enjoyed this event and that we see you here again. Today's talk promises to be one of the most rewarding events of this 2017-18 season, and bear with me because you'll understand why. Dr. James Alcock is Professor of Psychology at Glendon College, York University, and has for many years maintained an independent clinical practice. After graduating with an honors physics degree from McGill University, he worked as a systems engineer for IBM for several years and went on to complete a PhD in social psychology at McMaster, followed by a clinical internship. James is a member of the College of Psychologists of Ontario, a fellow of the Canadian Psychological Association. His research interests are focused on the psychology of belief. His book, Belief, was published earlier this month by Prometheus Books. James Alcock is this long-serving member of the Executive Committee of the Committee for Scientific Skeptical Inquiry. James was one of the pioneering founders of the skeptical movement in North America, and he agreed to provide an informal presentation regarding his involvement in Psychoc and the skeptical movement over the years. I also want to mention that Jim is a long-time member of the Skeptics Toolbox faculty and lectures at the 4-day workshop that teaches attendees critical thinking skills for their daily lives. Enough for the introduction. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't usually have a tall beer before I talk. I wasn't going to today, but we're having supper downstairs, and I said, well, I'll have them after this now. George said, and face traffic? So I had a choice, face the audience, face traffic. So we'll see how this goes. So I'm here to talk about belief, and George, you need the projector going. Oh.
We had this going before we went down. I know. Just need to have the display from
there we go. Okay, so tonight I'm going to talk about beliefs and how we deal with people who hold beliefs contrary to our own. Now, we all have exactly the same sets of beliefs. Life would be boring. Society would soon stagnate because differences in belief drive creativity. They force us to think about things. They bring about change. But sometimes beliefs are so dramatically different, and if they're important beliefs, this not only impedes progress, but it can lead us to difficulties in dealing with important risks. Think, for example, the arguments over climate change. And sometimes beliefs can be so opposed and so important that they lead to war. Now, I'm sure everybody in this room knows how difficult it can be to deal with somebody who has an important belief directly opposed to your own. I want to start with an example. Now, suppose I were to tell you that my belief is that the two sides of this laptop computer are exactly the same color. So that's my belief. How many would agree with me? One, okay. Nobody else. So the two of us against the world. So our beliefs collide these things. I say those are the same color. The rest of you say they're different. But suppose what we do in color, you're saying that they're different colors, I'm saying they're the same color. One of my heroes when I was a kid listening to radio, later television, was Jack Webb's characterization of Sergeant Joe Friday, whose mantra was just the facts. So let's look at the facts here. Suppose I do this. And come up that center section, you'll all see my belief is pretty well supported. The rest of you have fallen for an optical illusion. What happens is our brains perceive this in such a way that we assume automatically, unconsciously, that the lower part is in shadow. And because of that, our brains automatically lighten it up. But it's purely an illusion. They're exactly the same color. And so tonight I want to talk about not just these kinds of illusions, but how some very important beliefs collide. And I want to start with some examples you might be familiar with. You may remember a few years ago the case of this little girl, 11-year-old Michaela Sue. She was being treated for leukemia in Ontario, and the doctors told her and her family that with 2 years of chemo, there was an 80% probability that she would survive and do well. But her parents did not accept that. They pulled her out of chemotherapy, instead took her to Hippocrates Health Institute in Florida, where she was treated by alternative techniques, including laser therapy, whatever that is, colon hydrotherapy, special diets. And not long after she died. Now, Michaela herself had believed that she'd already been healed, that Jesus had told her that she was healed. And when you think that her parents might have learned a lesson from this, it's hard to accept that you made a decision that led to something this tragic. And so they attributed her death to the side effects of the chemotherapy she'd already received. My point is, these beliefs collide. There's no way the physicians are going to convince these people that chemotherapy was the way to go. There was no way that they were going to convince the doctors that, in fact, hydrotherapy, whatever it is, was the best approach. Now, before the last election in the United States, Ted Cruz told the Texas Tribune that people who believe in global warming are the same as people who believe in a flat Earth. Right? And of course, that belief collides with almost all the climate scientists in the world. This is a statement from the American Association of Advancement of Science. Scientific evidence is clear. Global climate change caused by human activities is occurring now. It's a growing threat to society. Again, both sides of this debate are irreconcilable. Another case, you may know of this famous actress, Jenny McCarthy. Her child, unfortunately, suffered from autism. Her child, when he was young, had received the MMR, mumps, measles, rubella shot, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and she thought that must have caused this problem. And so she contacted a researcher in England, someone who happened to have a financial interest in the single shots for each of these diseases, who would benefit financially if, in fact, the MMR shot was banned. And that of Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He took up her cause and subsequently published a research paper showing a connection between MMR and autism. Later on, it was found that he had falsified this data. It was fraudulent research. The paper was retracted by the journal, but nonetheless, despite the fact there's absolutely no scientific evidence linking MMR to autism, she and many of her followers continued to believe this. So again, beliefs collide, no possibility of resolution. And a final example having to do with evolution. Now, those who are creationists, who believe that the world was created according to the biblical texts, will tell us that it's about 6,000 years old. Okay. And of course, that's completely contrary to what science tells us. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. The universe began with the Big Bang almost 14 billion years ago. Again, the scientists aren't going to change their views, and the creationists aren't going to change theirs. The beliefs collide. So what can we do? Well, of course, we can yell at each other, but that isn't going to get us anywhere. People aren't going to change. So in order to get to a point where we can talk a little bit about how one might approach these collisions of beliefs, I first want to talk a bit about what beliefs are, how they function, why they're important to us. So what is a belief? Well, the way psychologists define beliefs is, as I've indicated here, a bit of stable information that we consider likely to be true. But there are two aspects to it. There's the content and there's the conviction. So the content could be anything. It could be ice is cold, Martha is honest. The conviction is the degree to which we assume this is correct, and what psychologists call the subjective probability of truth. So we can have beliefs that have a lot of content, no conviction. So we all, for example, have content about Santa Claus. You know about where he works, and about his elves at the North Pole, and about the reindeer and the sled, and how he delivers gifts to every little kid around the world on my birthday. Oh, sorry, on Christmas Eve. Happy my birthday. But that's not a belief, because we don't have any conviction that it's true. So it's content without conviction. Some beliefs are so important that we refer to them in psychology as primitive beliefs. It doesn't mean primitive in the sense of unsophisticated. but rather in the sense of fundamental. These are beliefs that we hold so firmly that it's almost impossible for us to be challenged successfully on them. I learned in childhood the idea that people need food to survive. If someone told you they didn't need food, you probably wouldn't even consider that a reasonable discussion to pursue. The earth is a globe, or there is not a God, depending on which family, which culture you grew up in. The problem is that these primitive beliefs are used to screen incoming information. That makes it easier for us to process information. We can't be running around testing every silly proposition that someone puts to us. And so if someone tries to convince you that the earth is flat, you'll say, I'm not going to listen to you. I have this primitive belief that it's a globe. I'm not going to even bother with it. So, for example, we might reject the notion of the breatharians. The breatharians, a small group of people, been around for a long time, claim they don't need food. They live off the air. So here's a little report on the breatharian couple survives in the universe's energy instead of food. And here, if you're interested, you can take an 8-day course to become a breatharian. And it really saves on the food budget. So, now let me talk a little bit about why we have beliefs, how they serve us. Number of functions. First of all, they organize, simplify our world. So what we learn about one element of a class of objects, we can apply to all of them. So if you see a new door, you might be in a foreign country, you don't have to say, well, I wonder what that rectangular thing is with a knob sticking out of it. You say, that's a door, I recognize the door. You have a pretty good idea how to open it, and you expect on the other side there's not going to be a precipitous drop from some thousands of feet to the bottom of the chasm. So they help us organize. If you know something about dogs, you may be right or wrong, but your belief may be that poodles are, Rottweilers are dangerous. That belief will help you simplify your worldview. Which dogs should I be nervous about? Whether it's correct or not. Beliefs motivate our actions and guide us. We can make decisions based on them. So if you have a boarding pass on Air France and it says Paris, you can most of the time expect that you get on that plane and end up in Paris. You know that there are weather problems or so on, there might be exceptions, but basically your belief that airplanes fly where they say they're going to fly is generally borne out, and so it helps you, again, navigate through the world. They help us explain the world to ourselves. So, for instance, you might ask, how come Harry became an alcoholic? Well, some people might say, weak-willed people. That's what it's, weak-willed. Others might say, it's a disease. Whatever your belief is, it helps you understand and explain things otherwise you might puzzle over. Beliefs can assuage anxiety. So if you are contemplating your demise, if you happen to believe that there's a better life after death, that may make you much more comfortable. Of course, some beliefs can also heighten anxiety. If you were thinking you're going to hell, they make you a bit more anxious. But many of our beliefs, we choose them because they make us feel better. They reduce our anxiety levels. And they also serve a very important social function. Beliefs promote cohesiveness in groups, motivate group action. I would suggest that the people in this room share some common beliefs, or you wouldn't be here. The organization that sponsors this is based on some shared beliefs. So, people building a barn share some beliefs that they can, first of all, build a barn, and secondly, if I help you build your barn, you'll probably help me build mine. So shared beliefs are important for both cohesiveness and for motivating action in a group context. Now, I want to talk about a number of sources that influence our beliefs, that seed our beliefs. First of all, I've already talked about perception. You saw the laptop. Before I showed you that it was an illusion, you would have walked away and said, yeah, it was just a laptop, different color, top and bottom. Many of our beliefs are formed by that kind of direct perception. But many more of our beliefs come from one kind of authority or another. We've got tens of thousands of years of civilization behind us. We can't go out and learn everything that all those people who come before us have learned on our own. We have to listen to authorities. And so we do. The question is, which authorities do we trust? Yeah. And when people trust different authorities, they end up with different beliefs. And this often leads to a collision in their thoughts. So the credibility of the source is important. And one person's source is credible, maybe another person's source is absolutely not credible. So, if I were to show you these headlines, you would probably not show anything other than some amused reaction. First of all, both of these headlines are contrary to primitive beliefs that we all hold. We don't think people can come back from the dead. We don't think that alien babies are around for adoption. And secondly, we probably wouldn't trust the sources, the National Enquirer or the Weekly World News. So we would reject those sources, but these, I don't know if they're both still around, but they used to sell very large numbers of issues every time they came out. So obviously some people thought they were important sources. I want to ask you about this, the origin of the universe, because I want to again focus on how we trust authorities. So some people will say the universe burst out of nothingness, as I mentioned earlier, 14 billion years ago. Big blast. Others will say it created about 6,000 years ago. These are the creationists, by this imperceptible, all-seeing, all-knowing supernatural being. And then there are those who have a cake and eat it too. They say, yeah, it was a big bang, but a big bang was set off by this imperceptible, all-seeing, all-knowing supernatural being. But in every case, if one were to ask, how do you know? We have to trust an authority. I certainly can't do this. I'm sure no one in this room has the wherewithal to actually test the notion that there was a big bang. We don't have the training, we don't have the equipment, we don't have research teams. We have to trust if we believe that, the astrophysicists. Those who believe in the creationist story, of course, trust the Bible. That's their authority. And those who go for the combined option have to trust both. But if the astrophysicists are wrong, in fact, I read just the other day, by the way, there's some controversy. Was it really Big Bang or was it something else? And this is, of course, the fodder of science. Scientists argue over this all the time. But as lay people, we simply wait for the results that the majority of scientists accept, and if we are honest about it, we're trusting their authority. Now, Mao Zedong, if you read about Mao Zedong, he is clearly, I believe, one of the greatest mass murderers in history. Many Chinese believe he is a wonderful man. The Chinese revere him. They know nothing of his apparent cruelty. The question is, where's my evidence? Where's your evidence? I depend on books. I depend on people who have written about it. But guess what? So do the Chinese. They just have different sources. I have no way of going back in time and finding out what Mao Zedong was really like. I can only base my belief on my trust in the authorities. If the authorities are misleading me, then I will be guilty of being misled. So if we look at everyday news, there are a number of sites around that we can go to. If you're an American and you make a habit of watching Fox News, you probably get quite a different impression of Donald Trump than if you were, say, to watch CNN. And so even in terms of conventional news, the sources that we favor are very important in shaping the beliefs that we hold. Now, in recent years, we have this additional complication where someone, an important person in terms of power in the world, has attempted to discredit conventional news sources, telling people that the Washington Post and the New York Times, they make fake news, they're fake organizations, they lie. And if you believe that, how can you then ever run a check on what Fox News says? Fox News is apparently a reliable oracle of truth. So destroying credibility is a very serious matter, in my opinion, because it makes it more difficult for people to test what one organization says against another. There actually are some fake sites. I ran across this. There was a fake BBC news site put up by some Iranians, where if you happened to go to it, it looked like the BBC, telling you things that the Iranians would like you to hear. So that's real fake news. But the question is, for psychologists, what's the effect of fake news? I mean, obviously some people believe it, some people don't. It throws sources into question in terms of credibility. Research shows that fake news, or I'm going to refer to it now as false news, can have a very important influence on people. for the simple reason that it produces what's called the illusory truth effect. This has been shown over and over in psychological experiments. Expose people to a bit of information that's false. Let them hear it enough times. And unless they've actually gone out on their own and questioned it and looked for alternative sources, sooner or later it starts to take on the mantle of truth. You know, George Goebbels, Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda in Nazi Germany, was well aware of this and spoke of, if you say it long enough and long enough, people will believe it. He also spoke of the big lie. Say something so preposterous that most people say, well, it has to be true. No one would say maybe that's preposterous. So people can be manipulated through simply repeating something over and over. And why is this? It's because things that we can recall easily tend to be things that we're certain about. So if you think back in high school, and you can remember some scene with pretty good clarity, you'll say, yeah, I'm sure of that. But if it's a bit foggy in your mind, you'll say, I'm not sure, maybe that didn't happen. So we automatically come to associate clarity of memory with accuracy. Now, it's not 100% the case that we do that, but it's an influence that's an important one. And over time, this research shows that not only can we come to see a message that we might have initially thought was suspect, we might come to see it as being more likely to be true, but we also tend to look at the source of the message and increase our reliability rating of that source. And of course, advertisers advertise all the time. These simple slogans that get to be very annoying, they're doing exactly that. Say it long enough, loud enough, people will believe it. And they've also shown in their research that the annoyance produced by the repetition is more than offset by the increased familiarity of the message, and what goes with that is increased acceptance that this must be true. Well, some people, I've read this in the paper, some people don't worry about false news, fake news. Young people are media savvy. They see through this stuff. Well, not so, as it turns out. Big study done in the United States a couple of years ago, 8,000 middle school, high school, college students. They were given fake news, real news, etc., etc. They couldn't tell the difference. They mistook fraudulent news reports for fact, and material that we see more and more often these days, it seems, in publications, material that's labeled sponsored news content, they took that to be journalism. Right? So there's a serious problem here. Worse, another study has shown false news travels more quickly than true news. Study of rumored cascades, people posting something and being reposted between 2006 and 2017. False news items, 70% more likely to be retweeted than true. Why should that be? Well, because false news is usually more interesting. You know, it's the old thing about dog bites man, not a big deal. Man bites dog. Hey, that's interesting. Hey, Harry, did you hear about this dog? This man that bit a dog. Did something wrong with it? Man bites dog. People like to share novel information, and so since false news is often more novel than true news, it spreads more quickly. It's a little bit like urban legends. One of the first urban legends I heard about, you may have heard it as well, was the cement truck driver who comes home unexpectedly, sees a convertible in the driveway, sneaks around and sees his wife in bed with some stranger, so he fills up the convertible with cement, drives away. Now that spread like wildfire across North America into Western Europe about 25, 30 years ago. It wasn't true, it never happened. But it's that notion that, hey, this sounds interesting. Urban legends spread because people sort of hope they're true. They're good stories. They're too good not to be true. And there's always, I heard it from a friend of my friend, honestly, I know it for sure, it's true. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about is context. Again, psychologists always come up with these rather trite labels. Continued influence effect. Guess what that means? Well, information that you initially considered to be true, and then someone tells you it's false, in many cases continues to influence you, whether you like it or not. So retraction of false or erroneous information does not reset our beliefs. You may think it does, but think, for example, someone is accused of a heinous crime. Someone is accused of child abuse. Trial is held, person's found not guilty. Do you hire that person as your babysitter? You don't quite reset. As someone once said, once the bell rings, you can't unring the bell. It's been done. It's in your mind. And that's the problem. And I'm not saying that this happens all the time. I'm saying it's a tendency. And even if we think ourselves very critical of our thinking, we can still be influenced without realizing it. So another source of belief is reason. We all like to think of ourselves as reasonable people. And some of our beliefs, we do form them through reason. So if you want to buy a car, you probably go out and test ride some cars, talk to friends who know cars, read consumer reports, read auto magazines. You come to a reasoned decision. That's good, but...
Stop.
Oh.